All right, guys, welcome back. In today's video, we're going to be going over what I guess I'll title the Ultimate Guide to 4L80E Transmission Identification. So what I'm going to show you today is a lot of technical detail about how to identify the year of manufacture, the original application, and what the 4L80E era is of the particular one that you're looking at. So let's start with the most obvious identification, which is this metal ID tag that you'll find near the back. What we're going to do is we're going to talk about what these letter codes mean and what these stamp digits mean and how you can tell what year this particular transmission was made and what model year it was made for and what engine power team it was originally paired with. So let's take a look at that detail. So guys, the first thing that you're going to want to be able to do is to tell, do you have a 4L80E transmission or the later 4L85E? And you can do that by opening up the glove box and checking the service parts identification sticker that's inside. These 3 character codes that you see are called regular production option codes, or RPO codes. If you have an MT1, the vehicle came with a 4L80E. If you have an MN8, then it came with a 4L80E heavy duty, or what was later branded as the 4L85E. Another quick and easy way to identify the transmission externally is if you look underneath at the pan. All 4L80E family transmissions will have 17 bolts securing the pan to the case. And if you happen to remove the drive shaft and the yoke, you'll find that they all have a 32 spline output shaft. If we take a look at the side, this would be the passenger side of the transmission, then we can see the transmission ID nameplate location that we talked about earlier with the metal tag that we'll get into some more detail soon. And there's also a broadcast sticker on top of that shelf that you see, and the case casting number location right on the side there as well. Over on the right is a blow-up of the ID nameplate, the metal tag. The format is a model number in the upper left, a P, which tells the family of the transmission. All 4L80E and 4L85E transmissions will have a letter P here. And then the stamp code in the bottom area that's stamped by the employee on the manufacturing line at GM would be the model year, 2 digits, the calendar year, single digit, and then a Julian date when the transmission was assembled. And when they mean by calendar year, in model year 1995, production started in 1994, right? That's what they mean about calendar year versus model year. And then lastly, the whole naming, if you look up towards the top here, the 4 means it's a 4-speed transmission, L longitudinal, which is rear-wheel drive, 80 is the series based on the amount of carrying capacity this transmission can handle, and the E is electronically controlled. Obviously, from that 80, you can infer that the 85 can handle more, and you'd find it in more upper-level trucks. Let's take a look at the tag itself in more detail. So in the red areas, I'll focus on things and explode them out in more detail. So the model. So this is just for model year 1999, and it might even be missing a few here and there. But these are the codes for 1999. Other years may have different codes. There may be additional ones. There may be subtractions, or they may be the same. But this just gives you an idea how that model code was used. It would tie the transmission to a particular engine in a particular weight class vehicle, and that would give you a powertrain team for that code. And then on the lower right, I also have a few other vehicles that were not necessarily GM vehicles, but also used the 4L80, and they have some codes assigned by GM as well, and we'll talk about some of those a little bit. This bottom section, so now highlighting in red the date stamping with the model year, the calendar year, and the Julian date, I'm going to give you some examples of how to read this date. So the example we have here is model year 1995, and this transmission was built on December 1st, 1994. Only 2 things that are going to be different about this from all the years. In 1991, the calendar year was not used. Don't know why. The very first year, they didn't use that calendar year. They didn't stamp it. And for 95 and 96, you'll find that there is a digit that's a prefix that's etched alongside the model code in the tag's paint. And I'll show you some examples of that as well. But other than those two variances, everything's going to be the same. Here's how to read the dates. So the only difference is whether it's a leap year. So the table here on the left is for all years except a leap year, and the table on the right is for leap years. And for the production run of this transmission, that's only 5 years, 92, 96, 2000, 2004, and 2008. Find the month along the top, find the day along the left, intersect it, and that is what that code means. So in the example we had before, where we had 1994, 335, we use the table on the left, we find 335 up in the top right, and that's where we see that that is December 1st. That's how we read that. Now, looking at the tag overall, it also had colors. The production tags had a sequence that ran red, blue, yellow, and then in 96 they stopped the cycle and it just ran yellow all the way until they ended the use of these metal tags at the end of model year 2007. Then they didn't use tags anymore, they switched to stickers. The remanufactured units always used green or dark blue depending on where they were remanufactured. So that's the coloring. Now I'm 100% on all these colors except for 1991. In the 7 or 10 months or so of sampling salvage yard units I used to collect data for this video, I found maybe a dozen, baker's dozen of 1991 transmissions. None of them had perfect paint, but the ones that had residual paint, it all looked like flakes of red, so I'm saying it's red for 91. If you've got proof it's otherwise, I'd love to hear it in the comments below. Here's some live examples of the tags. And the one in 1991 that you have up there, that's why I got the question marks there. You know, it's kind of faintly red. I'm 90% sure it's red, but again, you know, if you got proof of something else, I'd love to hear it, but I'm going to say it's red. Here you can see on the 91 that they did not stamp the calendar year, just the model year, and all the others are correct. Some other things to highlight, 91 and 92 and 93 transmissions made in calendar year 92 had a different font and format on the text of the tag. If you take a look at it, you can see the big Hydra-matic at the bottom was discontinued as you got into calendar year 1993. Another thing I would highlight here is as you get down to 95, you can see that in calendar year 94, this BJP code, it just says BJ. But when you look at calendar year 95, it has a 5 in the front of the A code there. So that was what I was saying earlier, that when the calendar year matched the model year for 95 and 96 only, they stuck the digit here in the front of the code. So you can see that with the 5A in the second row blue, and then over in the second row to the right, you can see it with the 6K, where they did that just for those 2 years only, and then they discontinued that. So you can see here a bunch of examples on how to read the dates with the codes that are given, and I've got one for every year that's out there. Here's another set that runs us all the way out until production ended after model year 2007, production being with these metal identification tags. They were deprecated after that. Now let's take a look at the metal tags that were used when the transmission was rebuilt by General Motors. General Motors called these SRTAs, or Service Replacement Transmission Assemblies. Whereas the original production tags were riveted onto the side of the case, the tags used during SRTA rebuilds were glued. They were not riveted. And typically you'd find two types: a green replacement tag when the transmission was rebuilt by someone GM has hired and outsourced to do it, and a blue tag when GM rebuilt it themselves. And you'd typically find the blue tags right above the casting number on the side, and you'd typically find the green tags right next to the place where the original one was riveted on, like you see in these two pictures here. The format over on the left is a little different. The tag's exactly the same size. The writing's a little different. It's got two stamp areas. Up in the middle area, what you're going to see is a model year. So in this example, it's a 2004. And then you'd see a model and series. So this is going to be a code similar to what was originally put on the production tag. And then at the bottom, you're going to see a calendar year, a Julian date, and then over on the right-hand side, just a serial number. So let's look at some examples of how to read these. So I don't have all of these. I don't think there were any rebuilt ones in 91. If they were, they would probably be a blue tag. But I got it going back here in 92. So here you can see one variance is the very early first half of these. The year is wrong for the build date. So you can see like this 1992 rebuilt on the 181st day. It has a serial of 8808. But it says 11 up in the upper stamping area, right? There's no way this was rebuilt in 2011, right? So that's incorrect. I believe what they used these digits for was to identify the location that did the rebuilding. But then you can see the BJP, and then there's usually a fixed digit here, typically a 6, but there's some others, some kind of a check digit, something internal to GM. The 94 one to the right of it's much easier to read. There you see it's an HDP, and again it's got a 13 there, but it was rebuilt in 1994 on the 293rd day. So again, the lower left is the year and date that the transmission was rebuilt. Then the number in the lower right is just a serial number for the particular rebuild facility. And then in the upper top is the application. The only thing that's pertinent here are the 3 letters that you'll see, 2 letters followed by a P. The other digits are not anything of value. And if we take a look at some other examples here we can see heading into 2007. Now finally, when we get to 2007, they started stamping these correctly. It's very interesting, right near the very end. And so then you can tell that this one, on these 2 on the lower right here, they were rebuilt in 2007 on the 263rd day, but they were intended for a 2004 BS model 4L80E on the first one, and then the one on the far right was rebuilt in 2007 on the 318th day and was intended for a 2004 WB model 4L80E. And this particular one, it's actually glued into where the production tag goes. So you can see mistakes from time to time on the manufacturing line. I'll show you some other examples of that as well. In fact, I'll flash up here. I should have done it earlier. I'll flash up here on the screen an example of a misstamped production tag for before you got to the CERTA section. Now these tags are not reproduced today for the 4L80, but they are reproduced for earlier GM transmissions. I'll flash on the screen a couple examples of that as well. Hopefully in some day in the future they'll make new blanks for these, so when you're restoring your transmission you can get it restamped how it originally was if the original one is in pretty bad condition. And again, these green tags ran only to 2007 as well. Now, in the military versions, it's a little different. The military versions, like the 4L80s used in the Humvees to the United States military and allies, they place this green tag in the upper dorsal area. You can see here it's very near the vent of the transmission. And the coding here was a little different. The date information on the rebuild's the same. So in this example here, 2007, rebuilt on the 346th day, serial number 3736. But the number up on top is not model information. It's a part number. It's a GM CERTA part number. And it's a part number you won't find in the civilian part system because it was a military part number. But it's glued in a similar fashion. It's the exact type of green tag there. So you can see there's an example of that. Here's another example of the military version. Again, glued in that upper area. Got a part number on it. Remanufactured on the 318th day of 2007. So there's some examples of how those were done. Now the blue tags were glued onto the side near the serial number. And my read on the blue tags is the blue ones were rebuilt by General Motors. In fact, I suspect they were actually rebuilt at the Willow Run plant directly, versus the green ones were outsourced to somebody that had bid on doing the work. And the reason I say that is in all the cases I've come across with the blue tags, the date of rebuilding is going to be very close, within weeks of the original assembly date. So I suspect these were problems that they discovered in assembly and they had to send them back to get repaired internally. I know in my own business where I work, when we have stuff in the manufacturing line that has to be repaired, we can no longer sell it as new. We have to repair it and we have to sell it as rebuilt, and I suspect that's the same thing going on here. Not 100%, so if you worked at Willow Run and you know some more detail on this, I'd love to hear about it in the comments below. But other than that comment, it's the same as what we've said on the earlier ones. In this example in the upper right, it's the 268th day of 2002. Stamped in the lower left of the tag is when it was remanufactured, and it was intended for a 3cc, which is a 2003 model year. The cc happens to be a 4L85. Here's another example that's earlier. So here you can see it's the earlier type of tag, but it's still in the same place and it still has the same characteristics I said before about being manufactured by GM directly. In this case, it was a 1992 4L80, the 2DL that you see in the upper stamping area, and it was remanufactured in 1991 on the 263rd day, and it's serial number 43844. Now there's another kind of tag that's out there, and on the upper left here I've kind of photoshopped and recreated the format for it because it's not anything you'll find in the service manual. And I'm sorry, this picture on the right is blurry. It's the best one I could locate at the time. This is an AC Delco rebuilt transmission. This was only done for a very short period of time. This was sold at a lower cost, and these AC Delco rebuilts were not Certas per se. They were intended where you could buy them as a DIYer, whereas the Certas were only sold through GM dealerships, and you could only get warrantied on them if they were installed by a dealership or an independent service center that was part of the program. These AC Delco ones, though, you could have picked up for less money because they were a little bit of a lower grade, I would say, and you would be able to obtain them much easier as a DIYer. Anyway, blue tag, format on the left here, AC Delco is the only logo data on it, and the only other text is stamped in as serial number. And then at the very top there, that first code, A9BSP, what we're interested in there is the 2 area is the model year, so the 9 in this case is the model year. Model number, BSP, like we've seen before, tells it's a 4L80E family transmission series. The 6 is a control number, just like we saw before. In the middle stamping area is going to be an AC Delco part number. In the lower stamping area, we're going to find an ID code that, in my experience, is always a 10, followed by the Julian date, which is a single year digit, and then either a 0 and 2 or 3 digits, or a total of 4, no matter how you look at it, for when it was built, and then a serial number. So that's the format for that particular style tag. Now here's a close-up example of a different one, just to show you how it is. So this is going to be a part number 242-14-431 that you see in the middle. There you see on the bottom that 10. This was rebuilt in 1999 on the 333rd day of the year. And in the top row, it's intended to be a 1993 application, code KLP, right? So that gives you an example. Now that A, which I believe is the shift code, you would normally expect to see that in front of the 3. So you would have expected to see an A3 KLP, but here's another example of an assembly line mistake. So there's an example of that metal tag. And that completes all of the metal tags that you'll encounter on this one. Another thing I'll say about the AC Delco tags is, since they were never riveted, they have no rivet hole. They were always glued on to the case. All right, so guys, here's an example of a case that's missing this tag, right? And sometimes, you have these tags where they can fall off or they're loose, right? And surprisingly, the little rivet that goes in here, holds them on, is still serviced by GM. It's an 862-2361. If we zoom in here, it looks a little bit like this. It's a little bit oversized, and you see it's knurled on the end, and that's a good way to replace that. You can hold your original tag back on there. Now, on the bell housing, there will be a sticker, and the way these work is, on the left-hand side are the kind of stickers that are black and silver that you find with the green rebuild metal tags I just went over. And on the right-hand side of the screen are these blue stickers, these blue and silver stickers, and they'll be found with the blue CERTA ID tags. The top row is the early style from 91 to 94, and the bottom row is the last style that was used from 95 to 2007. And again, my theory on this is the ones that have the sticker you see on the left with the green tags were rebuilt for General Motors, just like it says at the bottom of these stickers. But the ones with the blue were remanufactured by General Motors. So again, I believe these were in-house rebuilds to correct assembly line issues. They'll typically be dated very close to the original assembly date, and they're sold as CERTAs because once you crack them open again, by law, you can't sell them as brand new parts anymore. Now, the AC Delco sticker looks like the one on the left, and that was used from 97 to around 2005 only. And then the current sticker is the one on the right that started in 2008. Now, even though General Motors has changed its logo, I saw a new transmission, not one of these, but a 6L90 come into a local dealership just at the end of last year, still using this same type of sticker. So I guess they're going to run out their inventory before they change their blue and white logo there that you see. So I'm going to suggest that at the time of this video, that's still what you'll see as the current factory labeling on the bell housing for these rebuilt CERTA transmissions. All right, guys, now that we've gone over the different metal identification tags that we can find, where to find them and how to read them, let's move over to this shelf area of the casting where we'll always find a white sticker. This is the broadcast code sticker, and this is the type that's used when the transmission was originally manufactured, but there are other types. Let's go through all of the different types and codes for these stickers. Now, after 2007, we went to these white rebuild stickers that get affixed into the area where the broadcast sticker would normally be. Now, these have as you can see, they have a little bit of a different shape to them than the broadcast sticker that we'll talk about next, and their encoding is a little bit different. But the way you can read these three examples, starting from left to right, the one on the left, an 07 MLP, and with an ML model, it's a 4L85, and of course the P suffix will persist on all of these to indicate that it is a 4L80 family series transmission. The middle one is a 93 model year, model code TD, and the one on the right is a 2009 model year, model code ML. And again, they will have the sticker on the bell housing that I showed earlier, that style there. Now here's the two types. The first design shape has the notch on the left and then the edges cut off on the right that you can see. So on the edge, the two corners are cut off of the sticker, and then on the left, there's these two little notch outs. But on the top row, it's the model year, the model code, and the transmission family. And then on the far right, it's the transmission assembly, the remanufactured part number, and then the rebuild Julian date, followed by an GM internal code. And then on the bottom area, this information is repeated. So the broadcast code, 98TZP, and then you'll have a 7, which is just an internal code, and then you'll see the Julian date repeated, 08198, and then you'll see this internal code repeated at the end, 008, and then that whole thing is on a barcode. So this example here is intended for model year 1998. It's a model TZ, and it was rebuilt in 2008 on the 198th day. Now the second design sticker flips it, so the corners are cut off on the left and the notches are on the right, but the format is largely the same. So you see again, it's model year, model code, family, part number, some internal coding after the Julian date, and then the whole information is repeated on the bottom and then assigned to a barcode. In this example, what we have is a model year 2009 model MS transmission. It was rebuilt in 2016 on the 193rd day. And again, this is a second design type of CERTA identification sticker. Now on the military versions, and I'm sorry this one's a little blurry, but this is the best I could do to blow it up. It's a little different. Model year, model code, transmission family, remanufactured assembly number, GM code, Julian date, right? All are largely the same format, same cutoff corners on the left, same notches on the right. The numbering, though, is not a GM number. By this time frame, these were being rebuilt directly by AM General. In fact, after the Willow Run GM plant closed in 2009, GM was working with AM General, very similar to how they transferred over production of the 6.5-liter diesel V8 engines that are used in the military Humvees several years before that. I think that was back in 99 or so. But for these transmissions, they started working with AM General to transfer all of that information in 2008. And then by the time the 2000 model year ended, AM General picked up the production of these. So this one was rebuilt in 2011 on the 340th day, and it was rebuilt by AM General, not GM. Now, there's also a sticker used on GM performance parts, and there is a 4L80E available from Chevrolet Performance. This one's format's a little different, right? Because there's not really a model year for these performance assemblies. But what we're talking about here is the Hydra-matic 4L85. So it's got a model number 572X. The P, of course, it's in the same family. In this particular one, it's kind of hard to see because the cooling line's in the way, but you can make it out above the barcode. It was built, not rebuilt, built, brand new parts in 2016 on the 26th day. And again, these performance transmissions that are manufactured after 2009. They're built by AM General at the AM General Transmission Products Division, GTP. And that's why you'll see in a little bit, I'll show you those casting indications between GM and AM General. Now here's the broadcast code. So the broadcast code, so we talked about the metal codes for both production, the metal tags rather for both production and CERTAs, and we've talked about how those metal tags were replaced by these white stickers. When you had production, though, that place above the casting number was reserved for these white broadcast codes. These would be included when the transmissions were brand new. You'd have, like you see in the example on the left that I've kind of mocked up here, you'd have a model year and a model code and a transmission family. Now this one here, I cut and pasted out of a different service manual, so it's got an A. That's obviously a different transmission family. You'll see a P, as you see on the right with the actual examples. And then 4 points to the assembly part number. 5 will tell you the plant, and for the 4L80E, it was only Willow Run. Ypsilanti, Michigan is where that was located. And then 6 is a sequential serial number, and then reading from right to left, 7 was a source code, 8 was the broadcast code repeated, 9, of course, is the barcode representing all that, and 10 is an ID number. Typically, it's always a 61 on these 4L80s. So there you see an example of 94, 99, 03, and 07 of these broadcast code stickers. This is the first design that was used through 2007 with the metal ID tags and riveted on the back. When they went in 2008 to stopping the use of the metal ID tags, what took its place was a different broadcast code sticker that had to encapsulate the information that used to be on the tag along with the information that used to be on the broadcast sticker. And that's what you see here. Very similar format to what we saw on the CERTA stickers with the notches cut off on the right and the corners cut off on the left. But here you can see again, it's the same kind of format, model year, model code, transmission family. And again, it's always a P for the 4L80s. This piece I cut out here on the left is from a service manual for a different transmission because they didn't have one for the 4L80. So that A, just disregard that, it's always a P. And again, you're going to have the Julian date like you see number 5 pointing to. So these two examples here is a 2008 Model MK, was initially built in 2007 on the 278th day. And the other one is a 2009 ML built in 2008 on the 346th day. That WRT that you see in both is the Willow Run plant code. Another mark we can find down from the VIN, if you see here's the vent pipe and you scroll down towards the front and top of the bell housing, there's often an ink stamp on the top area here consisting of the model code and the Julian date of the transmission. Let's look at some more info on that. All right, so let's go over some other things that you can see. So on the very top of the bell housing is very often, it can be worn off, but you should see a stamped ink code, which consists of the model number followed by the Julian date. So you see on the left here, we got a model KX built on the 235th day. Now we don't know what the year is because we got to go reference the other two pieces of information, the ID tag and the broadcast code sticker. But it's just another thing that you can use to identify the transmission. Perhaps you couldn't make out the Julian date on the tag and the broadcast code sticker was missing, but you could make out the model year, or you somehow had another way to identify the model year. Then here you can tell the date by finding this stamping that's on the top of the bell housing. All right, guys, something else you can find on these transmissions is a imprint or a stamping that was put on by the assembly plant when the transmission was bolted up to the engine and put in the vehicle. So this is at the vehicle assembly plant, not the transmission plant. And what we can see, this 8421 type casting, there's actually a flat area for stamping the VIN. And this is actually imprinted. So if we zoom in here, what we can see is there's a dot matrix imprint of the VIN. It's kind of, it's kind of read from bottom to top here. This actually is a TYR 165916 is what's on there. Now, it's not always going to be found here. I'm going to show you an example right next to it of another 8421 case, and you can see there is no VIN here. It's completely missing, and that's because right before 99, these dot matrix VIN imprints would have been put up on the top area, right? So on the top area, you can see there's a flat here, and there's also a flat right there, and it would have been on one of those two. But on this one, we can see that they actually stamped it in the middle. And it's hard to make out. Sometimes on these, you can take a little piece of paper, and you can kind of just do like a tracing with a pencil, and it might help you make those numbers out. But what you got going on here is a CXG is the first few numbers, and then 191438 is what's on this one, right? And so this ran in the mid part of the life of the vehicle. Let me show you on the other side what the very earliest ones used. Now in the very earliest ones on the passenger side, there's this flat area right here that all the case castings have. And before the dot matrix imprinting tool came into use, these would have a hand-stamped VIN right on this flat area here. So let's take a look at some other transmissions I've got and shown you some examples of what I've talked about here. Something else that you'll find on these transmissions is when they were assembled with the engine at the vehicle assembly plant, the vehicle assembly plant would stamp the VIN number, or rather a portion of the VIN number, onto the transmission. They would be using a dot matrix kind of imprinter that they pushed up against this. This would be two different places. The one I'm showing here is up on the dorsal area. There's like a flat that you can see, and I've had to zoom this in so you can see the code. But it was also applied in earlier years on the passenger side. Flat, and I'll show you that in the next page here. This particular one has a GM code of T, a model year of V, an assembly plant of F, and then the last 6 digits of the VIN that they're showing here are 048718. So that tells us that it's from a 97 vehicle that was manufactured in Flint, Michigan, with the VIN ending in 048718. And again, here's some tables to help you decode those letters for either the assembly plant or the model year. And then this next shot here is what it looks like on the passenger side for the earlier production, 94 and prior. They didn't use a dot matrix printer. They just actually had a hand stamp that they would stamp this into, but very similar format. And that'll be, as you can see over in the left of the picture, that's going to be right near the hashing cast into the side of the bell housing. You got this kind of flat here. Now I'll show you in the service manual. The service manual implies that this may have been stamped somewhere else but I've never seen it stamped anywhere than what you're seeing here. And this example is from a 95 vehicle that was assembled in Janesville, Wisconsin, with the last 6 of the VIN being 108336. All right, guys, in the back area, there can be different attachments on the tail that can help us identify the transmission. What we're seeing here is a transfer case adapter on a 4-wheel drive unit, so it's very small because the type of output shaft is not that large. If this had been a 2-wheel drive unit, here's an example of a 2-wheel drive unit that has a bolt-on drive shaft yoke. You can see this guy is going to extend out a lot further. And as a result of that extra length, we're actually going to end up with a different kind of housing on the back that's more like this. And there's other things that we can encounter too, so let's take a look at some of those options. So now let's take a look at some physical characteristic differences. So here's the tails. Upper left is a 4L80 with nothing attached to the tail, no extension. Underneath it is a 2-wheel drive extension. Over on the right, in the upper right, is a 4-wheel drive extension, and in the lower left is a 2-wheel drive with a drum parking brake on the end. And this is something you typically find like on a 3500 or higher truck. So that's another way you can kind of start to identify whether you've got 2-wheel drive or 4-wheel drive, or maybe what grade of truck that came out of. Differences on the fluid pan. On the left, 91 to 96, the pan was kind of flat. The circle area is where you'd find on the inside the magnet located, and you'll notice these typically do not have a drain plug, at least not from the factory. So either it's an aftermarket pan that added it, or it is added by the owner or some other way, but typically these don't have a drain plug. Now later in production, they started showing up with drain plugs. Over on the right, 97 through 2009, the magnet location is right above those squiggles that you see cast into the pan. And then there will typically always be a drain plug on civilian vehicles. I'll flash up here on the screen an example from a military one. The military Humvee style ones did not have a drain plug, but they used the same pan style. All right, guys, now let's talk about casting numbers. So the case is going to have a part number when the aluminum was originally cast at the foundry with a part number down here. And it'll have some text up here, like this one has Hydra-matic and this one is a late model, so it even has the 4L80E script. Let's go through all of the possible case numbers and their attributes that you'll find from 1991 to 2009 for the 4L80E. Here's a list of all the casting numbers across all the brands on the right from 91 to 2009. A couple of different ones in 91, a couple of different ones in 93 and 94, several different revisions in 95, a couple of changes in 96. Things started to settle down in 97 and 98, and then from 99 on into whatever is made today for the military, it's the 8421 casing. In parentheses on the right, I indicated some of the key changes with these different castings and what was going on with them. Some things I'll call out. From 91 up through 96, the cooling lines were all near the front. In 97, the 4250 was the first case design with separated cooler lines. Some other interesting facts, in 93, the 0581 bell housing was the first one to get the hash marks cast into the side. The 1994 0726 was the first case that had bosses cast for a neutral safety switch, although they weren't tapped yet. 2226 and 95 was the first case where those bosses for the neutral safety switch got tapped. 3370 in model year 1996 was the first case with exhaust heat shield mounting bosses added. And then if we go down to 1999, this was the first and only case, obviously, since there were no other further revisions, with a 12 o'clock bolt hole added. And also, 99 had a 4L80E script added and capitalized the Hydra-matic. We'll see some examples of this. In 2003, that script was removed, probably because it was conflicting with the 4L85 application. And then in 2004, the unused cooler line boss from the two front entries that were replaced in 97 finally got removed. And you notice that they started to cut some notches in the exhaust heat shield bosses. At the bottom, I put a note out that after 2009, these transmissions continued to be both manufactured new for both the military and sold through Chevrolet Performance for the Supermatic. And they also continued to be remanufactured, and all of that was done by AM General's GTP division. All right, some other things that you can use for identification. Very early units would not have a plug-in type connector here. It would be a bolt-on type connector for 91 and 92. And 93, they serviced to change that. Other things that you'll find are the neutral safety switch bosses for attaching it here and here. They're not going to be present on early castings, or they're going to be present, but they won't be drilled and tapped. Let's go over all of that. We'll also go over some of these other marks, like this hash marking that you see on the sides of the bell housing, this kind of molded in piece here. These are also things that varied by model year. So we'll go over this as we go through all the different casting numbers. In 91 to 98, all the case castings had a straight dorsal spine and no bolt hole in the 12 o'clock position. But starting in 99, and all the way through the end, the dorsal got angled over and a 12 o'clock bolt hole was added. Now, sometimes in the military, and I say sometimes because it's difficult to tell when this happened, but certainly for 99 up till today, what you'll find is the 12 o'clock bolt hole has been shaved off when it's used with the 6.5 liter V8 engine application. And you'll often find out that the driver's side bracket attachment for the cable linkage has been shaved off. You'll sometimes see this in civilian units, although they are either recycled from military stock or they've been cut off by previous owners who are doing it for clearance reasons because they're maybe mating this transmission up to a vehicle that it wasn't originally intended for. But that's something to note as well to help you identify the transmission. Here's some other examples. So in 91 to 93, there was only 2 reinforcement ribs for mounting the production ID tag. Starting in 93, they added a middle one, a third one, and they ran with that reinforcement rib all the way to the current production. 91 to 92, they did not have any hash marks cast into the side of the bell housing. It was just smooth aluminum there. This particular example, you can also see that the cable bracket mounting has been cut off, like in the military-specific cases. And I think there were probably some applications where GM might have done this for clearance reasons. That's why I say it's not 100% guaranteed that that kind of scenario is military only. But it is very odd to see outside of that. 93 to 2009 on the right, we see we added these hash marks on the sides, both passenger and driver side of the bell housing. And you see on this one, that mounting bracket is intact with the mounting hole. I'll show a picture up here too of what mounts to that, what that bracket looks like. That might help you as well. Here are these flats from 99 to 2009 that were added for doing the VIN imprinting. So, you know, the older ones, it was done on the passenger side flat area that I showed you. Occasionally, they would do it elsewhere, but that's primarily where you'll see it. And then later years, they would do it on the flat area stamped up on top. But in 99 forward, it's typically found on this casting area here that you see. 91 to late 93 had a bolt-on electrical connector. 93 on up had a snap-on electrical connector for the wiring harness. In fact, at the bottom there, the specific date of production, May 5th of 93, is when that stopped. If we take a look at the area around the connector for the wiring harness, we can see from 91 to 94, there was no provision to mount a range selector bracket in the rear. So you can see over on the left there that the mounting bosses that come up for the pan don't have a provision for that. But if we look over on the right, starting in model year 1995, that was raised up to allow for that bracket to be mounted there. And then we can see, starting in 94, they actually cut some notches in there. Not really sure why, weight saving perhaps, not clear, but you can see that kind of ranging there. And again, that can help you identify and zero in on a particular year for that 4L80. If we look at the side area here, we can see from 99 to 2001, the Hydra-matic script is all uppercase, and underneath it, it would say in kind of a script writing 4L80E. And then you can see up in the top there, there's a vestigial cooling boss present from when the transmissions used both of the cooling lines in the front before one was moved to the rear. But if we look in the right-hand picture, we can see starting in 2004's model year, that vestigial cooling boss was removed. And in 2001 model year, the 2002, the 4L85 came out. So model year 2001, they no longer, this was the last year they used the 4L80 heavy duty naming. So when they went to the 4L85E, they had to pull off in 2002 this 4L80E script so it wouldn't be confusing. And then again, at the other change, you see now there's a notch cut in the heat shield boss bolt area starting in model year 2004. And again, I suspect that's for some type of weight saving. Okay, so here we can see from 2009 to current the GTP castings. So these are the ones that are made by General Transmission products that are part of AM General. So after the line in Willow Run at General Motors shut down and they smoothly transitioned this manufacturing over to AM General so that there would be no interruption in supplying gear to the military, those castings started picking up this GTP that you see, and then you'll see this 4L80 on the side there. Now that 4L80 won't appear on the castings that are done for the Chevrolet Performance transmissions, like the Hydra-matic 4L85 won't have that. It'll just say GTP. But that's another important distinction that you can tell where it was made. So this kind of froze everything at the 2420, 8421 GM case. AM General just kept going with that same case as the basis. Now here's an example of the Hydra-matic 4L85, and you can see here the Hydra-matic branding and the 4L80E casting have been cut off, and it just says GTP and a casting number. And this is what you would see if you brought a brand new Hydra-matic 4L85E transmission from Chevrolet Performance today, which is currently part 193-00175. That's what you would see there. And that's made by AM General, GTP division actually, not General Motors. All right, let's look at casting numbers. Different years here. Here's 96 to 98. Here's an example of the 4250. Late 95 to early 96. Here's an example of the 3370. And that's, you can note that the exhaust heat shield mounting boss was added with that casting. In 96, here's an example of the 4250. You can see we still have two front cooling lines. But by 97, with the 4250, same casting number, but change in design as they went, we started to see that front cooling line boss was no longer tapped. It was still there, but they're now using the one in the back. So the casting for the one in the back, I don't show in the picture on the left, but that casting was done on the 4250. It's just a question of when they started using it, and that was in 97. So you'd find all three of these in 96, but only the front two were used. But in 97, the back one started getting used. Here's an example in mid-95 of the 2608 case, and in early 95, the 2226 case. Here's mid-94 0726 case showing how the neutral safety switch bosses were added, but were not tapped. You can see up on top, the earlier cases, they don't have these bosses. And then on the lower right, on the 2226 case in early 95, they're now tapped, and they remain tapped through the end of production. Here's a late 93 to early 94 4198 case. You can see here there's a casting shelf between the pan bolt bosses, and this is where I'll show you in a minute. You know, in the service manual implied you might see that VIN stamping and other stampings that we don't actually see used. And then on the right, mid-1994, it's a 0726 casting. You can see that shelf has now been removed now, and you just have enough of a boss there to take the pan bolts, nothing more. The GM service manual describes one additional format for this identification information that you can see here. And it suggests that this is located on the casting flat that occurs below the casting number of the case. This particular flat area was only used from 1991 until very early in 1994, but I've never actually seen this code stamped on any of those. If you have an example of that, I'd love to hear about it below in the comments. 92 to early 93 was the 0581 case, and late 91 was the 9550 case. And then the original one that started it all was the 7104. And here you can see that started with the Hydra-matic branding being an upper-lower case, and that's when that single casting shelf between the pan bolts first started. So now let me give you a quick overview of some other variants of the 4L80E. So General Motors made a variant of the 4L80E for use with some European brands, Jaguar, Rolls-Royce, Aston Martin, and Bentley. It's got a unique case, as you can see. The case casting's unique with all those cooling type fins all over it. Unique oil pan and a unique oil pan gasket. It's got a unique wiring harness connector. It's actually located in the right-hand rear. If you look at the picture on the left, towards the left rear of the picture, you can actually see the boss for that wiring harness. It's got a unique dipstick, a unique torque converter cover, a unique tail housing extension, and a unique output shaft. But other than that, it's identical to a 95, 96 circa 4L80 internally. So if you can rebuild a 4L80E, you can rebuild one of these for these exotic brands. These had a casting number of 8680582 from 92 to 95, and they started in 92, not 91. Here's some examples of some of their ID tags. Same format that we see for the U.S. production, right? So model year, calendar year, Julian date. A couple of broadcast code examples, same kind of thing, right? And so that in this case, ZL was one of the models used for these Jaguars, and ZF was another one of these models used for these Jaguars. RL was used for the Bentley engines in this time frame. Now, when we get to 96 to 2006, the casting number changes to a 2420-2610, and we see something peculiar. So we start to see now that the model year never gets revved. All of them, all of the applications of this casting number get stamped with a 96. The only thing that gets revved is the calendar year. So that is what's being used to tell when the thing was made. I suspect the 96 was just an internal code to let GM know it was one of these low volume units that was heading over to the UK for these brands. And then you can see an example of the broadcast code. Every one of them, every year, same broadcast code, 6RDP. Didn't matter what year it was. It had that same number. Here's another variation of the same casting number, but as used by Jaguar and Aston Martin. The previous ones were Bentley. The ones that went over to these brands were still coded the same for each year, but they were not the same as the Bentleys. In this case, they're all stamped with a 97 for the model year. So I guess the 97 was used by GM to tell that it's going over to Jaguar or Aston Martin, and the 96 was to tell if it was going over to Bentley or Rolls-Royce. Here's an example of some rebuilt versions of these European ones. So you can see the same kind of stickers were used and the same kind of thing, right? So the one on the lower left with the blue, I believe would have been one of these transmissions they found a problem with on the line and had to rebuild it in GM. And the one on the top would have been one that was outsourced and rebuilt normally. Both of these would be Certas. Over on the left is a close-up of the tag. You can see it's a code ZJP. And it was remanufactured in 1999 on the 63rd day. And what would not be complete on the family of this transmission with talking about an aftermarket case? So Reed Racing developed the Super 80 case for the 4L80E. This is a case that's designed strictly for off-road use, obviously, racetrack use. You have the guts of this is basically all of your upgraded 4L80E conventional design, but you have this unique case. It can have unique bell housing attachments so that it can actually be attached to other engines than was originally intended. All right, guys, I hope you found this very useful and interesting. That wraps up today's video on our grand ultimate field guide to the 4L80E transmission. Next time you're at a car show or a salvage yard, I hope what you learned today helps you in identifying the transmission you're looking at. If you've got questions or comments, go ahead and leave them below. I'll try to help. If you found this useful, you learned something, pay it forward and hit that like button. I'd really appreciate it. And as always, thanks for watching.